Hello, welcome to Gardener's World. Now, I have to confess that the dahlias here at Longmeadow this year have not been good. In fact, I'd go so far as to say they have flowered less than I have ever known them before. And that confused me for a bit because I had done everything I've always done. For 25 years, I've grown dahlias in the same way, and I'm talking particularly about the ones in pots. Pot them up in the good rich compost, and then every Friday morning, they get a soak and a feed, the Friday feed. But this was an exceptional year, and they should have been watered at least twice as much. So next year, I will use the evidence of my eyes rather than just draw upon experience. But having said that, I've learned something, and also the dahlias may not be at their best, but the rest of the garden is still looking really good. Coming up on today's programme, Carol celebrates the extraordinary variety and rich colours of that late-season star, the salvia.
It's as though they wait till this very moment to make an exhibition of themselves.
Arit Anderson investigates the extent of the use of plastic in our gardens and what steps are being taken to make it more recyclable.
This is fresh off the production line this morning.
Wow.
Effectively, it's 98% recycled material.
And I will be planting bulbs into meadow grass that are suitable for damp, shady conditions. Almost everything that we're doing in the garden at the moment is about planning for next year. What you do now is going to dramatically alter how your garden looks. And one of my favourite jobs at this time of year is planting bulbs in pots. And this means that you can have colour as early as late January, early February. However, they need good drainage. So just take your normal compost mix, and this could be just a standard bark-based potting compost, and then mix the same volume of grit with it. So pour that in, like that. In winter, cold, wet compost is what bulbs absolutely hate. And horticultural grit is ideal to open it out. Now, when it comes to containers, you can grow bulbs in absolutely anything, but I absolutely recommend using terracotta pots. When you have a terracotta pot, it's porous, which means that it will lose moisture through the sides. You don't want bulbs to sit in water. That is the very worst thing that can happen. Now, I'm going to start with one of my favourites, and a real cast-iron doer. This is Iris Histroides George. It has a deep purple flower with a yellow filament in the middle, and will start to flower somewhere between the beginning and the end of February. You can plant this in quite a small container. In fact, I'm going to use for this tiny little container. We'll put a little bit of a crock in the bottom there, add some compost. When you're planting in the ground, the basic rule is always twice the bulb's depth. Forget that. In a pot, particularly a little pot like this, as long as the tip is just below the surface, that's all you need worry about. If I put these in like this, I can cram them in too. So we've got 7 bulbs in a tiny little pot, and then I just cover them up. And a good tip is to put a layer of grit over the top of that, because when it rains or you water them, there's a real risk that these delicate satiny petals, which are only going to be about that high, get splashed and get muddy. And if we just put the grit on there, that keeps it clean. I'm now going to plant one of my favourite daffodils. It's as common as muck. You see it everywhere, and for very good reason, because it's just lovely. It's tete-a-tete. These little daffodils have the freeness of spirit that you get in wild daffodils and the intensity of colour that you get in those that have been highly bred. They're just a joy. And I've got a deeper bowl here because it's a slightly bigger plant and a much bigger bulb. And again, cram them in. These can stay in here for a few years. It's quite a good idea not to do all the bulb potting in one go. If you stagger it a little bit, you will stretch out the flowering season. Cover that over. You can easily plant any bulb right up to the end of October and put them somewhere cool but not too wet. And if you can, use a really nice terracotta pot. But I'm fully aware, for most of us, the reality is we buy our plants and grow them in plastic. But this is becoming a major environmental problem. And this year at Longmeadow, I've tried to use as little plastic as possible. It's been tricky. But the truth is that we, us gardeners, have to be part of the solution. Now, that is easier said than done, and it's not going to happen overnight. But the first thing we need to do is find out more about it. And Arit has been behind the scenes throughout the horticultural industry to find out as much as she can about this problem of plastic.
Back in the 1950s, plastic was the wonder product that transformed the way we live and shop. We live in a world surrounded by plastic. In the bathroom, in the kitchen, we can't seem to escape it. And it doesn't stop at the back door. As gardeners, one of the most exciting things is buying a new plant. We find the perfect flower for that gap in the border, buy it, plant it, ending up with a plastic pot to add to that pile of pots hiding in our gardens. And here's a fact that's going to make you sit up. Us gardeners are getting through 500 million plastic pots and bedding trays across the UK every year. I can't quite believe that figure. I've done a quick calculation and I think that means, laid out, these plastic pots would cover the Chelsea Flower Show ground roughly 149 times, and that's just 1 year. And it seems that we're collectively piling up an unthinkable amount of plastic. I find it worrying because with only a few exceptions, we have little choice but to buy the plastic pot with the plant. So I'm going on a journey of the plastic pot to find out why, to see if there are any changes happening and to find out what we can do about the mountains of plastic waste we're all creating. My first stop is where the pots are first used, a commercial nursery, to find out why they use plastic. And this is a big nursery. This is where lots of the plants you find in supermarkets and garden centres are grown.
Last year, we produced approximately 12 million pots and 2.5 million bedding packs.
Why are the pots plastic?
They're plastic because that's the industry standard. We've known those for over 50 years. It's a durable product and it forms the pots, the trays, with consistency, which is important for us. As you've seen, we're highly mechanised, so they've got to go through the machines. Black plastic's been used in particular because the black keeps the light away from the roots. Roots are photosensitive, so they want to grow away from light. We just produce a better plant in black plastic, it's proven.
It seems that plastic, and especially black plastic, is the way we most effectively mass-produce plants healthily. It's worth mentioning that some retailers have asked this nursery for alternatives to plastic pots, and they are doing some trials, so far with mixed results. And they do recycle when plastic comes to its end of life on site. We also spoke to a range of other commercial nurseries who told us they use black plastic for similar reasons. They're economical and they can also last for the long time plants often need to grow before being sold to garden centres. And that's my next stop, a garden centre. It's a small family-run business near Preston. They sell over 40,000 plants a year, mainly in plastic pots. I'm having a chat with Diane Harrison, who spends every day with customers. She sees the issue of plastics on the front line. So why are you using plastic, do you think?
Well, we've only been offered plants in plastic, and I think it's for reasons of transport and growing. It's got to stand up on the tables, it's got to stand up in a production system.
Do you find that you have customers that are asking you about recycling at all with the pots?
No, I don't think so, and I think because the customers are only buying 1 or 2 or 3 plants here and there, aren't they? They don't see that as a big issue, maybe.
Do you have a recycle scheme where the customers can bring them back?
We don't, no. We'll take them back as a goodwill gesture, and some we might be able to use, but on the whole, we don't have a recycling scheme for them at all, no. Likewise, we don't have a recycling scheme for the trays, so they're difficult to deal with.
Yeah, that is really hard, because as a garden centre, you're not growing on here, are you? So...
No, it's purely buying stock in from nurseries and then selling it through. So, yes, we have no use for old pots or old trays.
Are you able to send them back to the suppliers?
Generally not, no. And I suppose for plant health and disease and pest and disease, the suppliers don't want them back.
We spoke to a wide range of garden centres, DIY chains and supermarkets. They all told us a similar story. The garden centres sell in plastic because the nurseries supply the plants that way, and there's no apparent customer demand for alternatives or recycling. And maybe that's because, unlike food packaging, which stacks up in our bins, most of us only buy a few plants at a time, so we're in a bit of a bubble about the scale of the issue. So far, it seems that there's not much choice but to keep piling up our pots. How about curbside recycling them at home with all the other plastic we use? Well, it can be pretty confusing to know what can and can't be recycled and in which box or bin. And frankly, the news isn't great. Only a handful of local councils will take plastic plant pots for recycling, often for the same reason that these plastic food trays won't be allowed. This refuse facility is one of the most advanced primary sorting plants in the UK. It processes 132,500 tonnes of recycling per year.
When you put something in your curbside recycling, it's delivered to this facility by truck. It all gets put onto a conveyor belt, and the bottles and the tubs and the pots run along that conveyor, and we shine light onto the conveyor. And depending on the light that's reflected back, we can detect what the different materials are. So if we detect a pot, it will puff that pot with a jet of air into a different bay, so we can get all the same type of material into one place. Because we use light to detect plastics and what type of plastic they are, because black plastic doesn't reflect any light, it's very difficult to sort.
And that's why most councils won't accept plastic pots in curbside recycling. Many just can't sort them yet. This facility will recycle them if they catch them, but more likely it will end up incinerated and used to create electricity and heat, which is known as energy recovery. Here's Simon Ellen from the Recycling Association.
Recycling, it's all about circularity. You're using it again and again and again. We call it the circular economy. The problem is with incineration, with energy recovery, is that you break that circle. Plastic is petroleum-based, and it's not replaceable. So you burn it, then that is the end. OK, you're generating the energy, but you lose your non-renewable fossil fuel.
And that seems to be the crux of the problem. This can go in the household recycling bin and will go on to become something else. But on the whole, this can't. So what's happening is most of us are stockpiling plastic plant pots with nowhere to go, and the industry is creating even more pots to satisfy our desire for more plants. And this can't go on forever. Surely this isn't sustainable and has to change.
I don't know about you, but I'm still reeling at that figure. Over 500 million pots and trays every year. And although most of us just buy a few pots and it's not really very significant in every individual garden, put it all together and you can see the scale of the problem. Anyway, later on in the programme, Arit is going to go back to the industry and see what practical steps are being taken to combat this. Well, I'm going to plant these into a little gap. And these are Primula capitata. But primulas in the damp garden always look good. Someone was asking me why certain bits of the hostas have got eaten and not others. And almost certainly, that is where they've got frosted in spring. And you won't have seen the damage, but there was just enough damage to the structure of the plant to make it weak, and that's what slugs and snails like. That's a little cameo added in the garden. And of course, I will keep these pots, wash them, look after them, and reuse them for as long as possible. This is the viburnum plicatum morisii, which in spring has these wonderful horizontal tiers of flower. And in autumn, it has one of the most dramatic and intense colours in the whole garden. And although I always feel very sad that summer is slipping away and the swallows have gone home, there is no doubt about it. Autumn brings a lot of splendour. Right. Come on then. Next job. Come along. This piece of ground, which was mown as lawn for about 20 years, has one huge disadvantage, and that is it floods badly in winter. So the ground can be really wet for 6 to 8 months of the year. It's also got quite shady because the hedges have grown. However, I do want to convert it into what is essentially a wildflower meadow. Now, I've scattered some wildflower seed in here. I've added a few perennials, and now I want to add just 3 bulbs that will thrive in this slightly shady, rather damp soil. Now, the first is a small bulb, but it's a really dramatic flower. This is Fritillary meleagris, the snake's head fritillary. It's one of our native fritillaries, and it naturalizes in damp water meadows. And if you want things to look natural, don't place them. The best way to do this, and it's a tried and tested method, is just take a handful and throw them on the ground and plant them exactly where they land. Don't worry if there's a group of 3 or one is out on its own. That's how they grow in nature. What you can do to make life easy is to use one of these. This is a bulb planter, and it is so useful when you're planting into grass, because it works like this. You push it down, you lift it out, pop the bulb in, and ideally plant at a depth of 4 inches. If they're too shallow, they can dry out. They're more likely to be dug up by squirrels or badgers, and much better to get them down deep. So that's the first one. And then what you do with the second, the plug is pushed out, and there you are, and you just pop that back in the hole on top, like that. If you're planting into grass, make sure the grass is cut really short before you start, and that will make it much easier to make the holes, to see where the bulbs fall, and actually will do no harm at all. Now, if the ground is too hard, which it certainly often is in September, that's one of the real problems of planting into grass in September, a tip that you can do, and I've done very successfully before, is get a 3 or 4 inch pot like this and put 3 bulbs into this, and then just cover it over. And if you do, say, a dozen pots like that, you can plant them out in March when the foliage will be about that tall, and that works quite well too. So that's a fritillary. But I'm also going to plant 2 others. The first is a camassia. Now, this is a camassia quamash. And typically with camassias, it has dramatic foliage and then this spike of flower. And this has a very small bulb. You can see that it's not much bigger than the fritillary, but the flower is bigger. Now, I don't want these to dominate. I've only got 50 for this whole area. This I don't need to throw, so I'm going to place, so I'll just pop one in here, and I'll space these out. Again, trying not to make it too regular. This wants to look as natural as I possibly can. And then I'm going to add to that the summer snowflake, the leucojum, with flower stems growing about a foot or so high and these drooping white flowers like giant snowdrops. But you can see the bulbs are dramatically bigger. And if I have these in clumps all the way down, that will pick up on the snowdrops that we've got running down the edge. This is a woodland bulb, light shade and some damp, and this will be happy. And you can plant these bulbs any time over the next month. But the sooner you get them in the ground, the sooner their roots will get into the soil because they are growing actively from now onwards. Now, everything I'm doing here is geared towards making next spring look as good as possible. It's an investment in the future of the garden. But Carol has been to Newby Hall, near Ripon in Yorkshire, to celebrate a plant which is flourishing right now. Of course, I'm talking about salvias.
As summer begins to ebb away and the birds take up their autumnal song, we all get used to the idea that our gardens are quietly going to sleep. Colours begin to mellow, everything softens, but there's one exception, and that is the salvias. It's as though they wait till this very moment to make an exhibition of themselves with gorgeous colour that fills the garden with joy and gaiety. The name salvia comes from the Latin word salvare, which means to feel well and healthy. Historically, salvia was used to treat numerous ailments, and it has strong antiseptic properties. Salvias belong to the family Lamiaceae. There are more than 900 different species, and of course there are many more cultivars. But probably the salvia that most of us are most familiar with is Salvia officinalis, the common sage. Salvias have a very clever way of getting pollinated. A bee comes in here. As it does, it pushes a lever at the back of a flower in its search for nectar. That lever brings down these anthers, and they're full of pollen. So the insect is dusted with that pollen. When it flies away, eventually it will come to a flower where the anthers no longer have pollen on them. But at that stage, the stigma of that flower, the female part, will have become receptive. So the pollen is deposited onto that stigma and pollination takes place. It's really, really important that these flowers don't pollinate themselves, because that way they'll become inbred. And the more diverse it is, the better for the evolution and strength of the plant. There are salvias from almost all over the world, but at this time of year, the majority of plants in full flower hail from the Americas. This is Salvia discolor. I love it. You see it from a distance and you're aware of every leaf being outlined in white. And then you get the real surprise. Inside is this beautiful dark flower, almost black. It comes from Peru, but it looks such a picture of these other salvias. It's just perfect for this corner spot. Outside a small Mexican town, botanists discovered naturally occurring hybrid salvias, spontaneous crosses between Salvia gregii and Salvia microphylla. The town was called Jame, thus the hybrids were named Salvia cross Jamensis. This is Salvia jamensis Sierra San Antonio. It makes a short, bushy plant smothered in flowers of the most delectable peaches and cream colour. This is possibly the most popular salvia in the whole of salvia history. It's Salvia amistad, and no wonder people love it. It's got these dark bracts, and within them these rich purple flowers. It'll flower over a long period too, right the way through from midsummer until the frosts. And it's tall. Now, these plants were all produced this year from cuttings, and they're already nearly as tall as me. Salvias have to be amongst the easiest plants there are from which to take cuttings. You can do it at almost any time of year, providing you've got good green growth and just cut under a leaf node. Or side shoots, which you can actually detach with a heel and then straight to the potting bench and we'll pot them up. So I've already got some lovely gritty mixture in here because you want decent drainage. And then, first of all, I'm going to just neaten that heel, because if you leave it too long, it can cause your cutting to rot. Take off the bottom leaves, and then in here, just nip out that growing shoot. You can use anything to dibble them into this pot. So down to a decent depth. And then push them in so they're down to the base of those leaves. Usual thing with grit, it stops your cuttings rotting, it retains the moisture once these have been watered, and it'll help suppress any weeds. Water well once, which will settle the compost around the cuttings. Put it into a place out of direct sun, but with plenty of light, and keep it warm if you can. And eventually, after a few weeks, you'll see roots emerging there. At that stage, you can knock the whole thing out. You can pot them up individually, or you could take the 4 of those with their root ball and put it into a bigger pot. It couldn't be easier. Salvias are incredibly easy to cultivate. Their major requirement is sunshine. Water them really well and then let them go. Not only do salvias bring vivid colour to the late days of autumn, but they also bring such an extensive range of colour. It's positively kaleidoscopic, and what's more, in the low light of autumn, that colour really zings. You could almost say it dazzles.
Well, I do agree with Carol that salvias are a joy, but they've been even worse for me than my dahlias this year. Amistad, which normally is a surefire winner, is a shadow of itself. If any of you have had a similar experience with salvias in particular, let us know, because maybe we can build up a picture. I'm harvesting these potatoes. This is a variety I've not grown before. It's called Emily, and this is a main crop, blight resistant and lovely red colour. If you remember, I'm growing some purple potatoes at the other end of the row, so I may not be able to grow a colourful salvia, but I can produce brightly coloured spuds. Now, still to come, we visit a tiny but exotic garden in North London.
You create the illusion that the garden keeps on going, but in reality, it just ends 6 meters away.
But first, Mark Lane reveals the design secrets of prairie planting.
With autumn just round the corner, you might think that your garden has passed its peak. But there is one garden style that offers masses of late summer colour, texture and character, and that is the prairie garden. Prairies are synonymous with the Great Plains and grasslands of North America. And the key to this type of garden is to embrace the wild spirit of that natural environment. Today, I've come to Aston Pottery Gardens in Oxfordshire, where their prairie-inspired borders are in full flourish. Stephen Bourne is the owner and head gardener, and his family has farmed here for 10 generations. So Stephen, how did all of this begin?
It started about 35 years ago with my wife Jane and myself, and we decided that we would set up a pottery. And it's just grown and grown and grown, and then the gardens have grown around the pottery.
There's all these wonderful ornamental grasses throughout the garden, and a real prairie theme going on. Why is it that you like that style?
Well, I think probably the informality of it all, really. We've sort of taken the prairie-style planting another step further, in that whereas people generally plant in swathes of colour and waves of colour, we've actually started to develop it here so that when you actually look at it, it's a whole series of individual plants, much as you get on a North American prairie. You know, you look, but they're all dotted around, almost uniformly distributed amongst the whole thing.
Well, it is absolutely stunning. I just want to go and see more of it. For me, the prairie style is one of my absolute favourites. In fact, my whole garden at home is based on prairie planting. But here, they've expanded on that style and taken it to a whole new level, mixing grasses and flowers for a truly unique look. So how do you transform your own outdoor space into a slice of the North American wilderness? You don't need masses of space, but most prairie plants do need plenty of sunshine. A few do well in shade, but ideally you need a sunny location for optimum flowers. With plants at the heart of this style, you won't need to think too much about hard landscaping, but a feature pathway can add a striking and practical element, allowing you to enjoy your borders from every angle. Ornamental grasses are the bedrock of this style. Go bold, go tall, and go big. By planting them en masse, you create impact and wonderful movement. Lower down, you're looking for drifts of colour, evoking the naturalistic planting of meadows. Not every plant is a candidate for the prairie garden. Some are too aggressive, while others just aren't showy enough to make the cut. So here's my guide to the VIPs, the very important plants you'll need to get going. Take this wonderful Miscanthus sinensis with its firework-like plumes. It's just beautiful when the sun catches it and the wind just gently moves it. Also for height, we've got the wonderful Solidago. It's not an ornamental grass, it's a herbaceous perennial, but it gives you that same feeling. It's bright yellow and zesty, perfect for the back of the border. Dahlias are brilliant for late summer colour, and they'll go on for weeks from now. And just look at how they contrast against the willowy stems of these grasses. For a modern twist on the prairie style, why not plant a tapestry of annuals? Here, there are thousands to choose from, but amaranthus with its fiery spikes, amidst this colourful border, the effect is kaleidoscopic. The prairie style isn't for the faint-hearted. It's big, bold, and may require a few gardening hours. But if you're willing to channel your inner pioneer spirit, this can be a garden of pure escapism, a place to transport you to the flowering grasslands of the Wild West.
I've been to the prairies, and they are amazing. And some of the American gardens based upon them, or even European gardens with these great swathes of grasses and ancillary planting, are dramatic and beautiful. But you can use grasses, as I've done here, in a very different way. These are grasses really going for as much vertical accent as possible and using plants like teasels to complement that, which does mean a little bit of staking and a little bit of tweaking and propping all the time. But the result means that in a relatively small space, you can get the drama of grasses. Now, earlier on, Arit had a look at the problems associated with the use of plastic in horticulture. And not to put too fine a point on it, our over-dependence upon black plastic in particular. But now she sets out to see what solutions are on offer.
So far on my journey, I found that the majority of the big commercial nurseries grow plants in plastic pots because they produce healthy plants and work effectively in the production line. And the majority of garden centres are selling the plants in plastic pots because nurseries supply them that way. And most customers aren't asking for any alternatives. I've also found that the black colour makes it harder to sort and recycle. But it's not all bad news. To find out why, I need to go back to the beginning where the plastic pots are made. And here's something that might surprise you. Most are already produced from recycled materials. I'm picking the brain of Alex Everett, who develops new products for a plastics company.
We manufacture approximately 100 million plant pots per year. It's using 3,600 tonnes of material per annum.
That is amazing. And exactly what is this made from?
This is a polypropylene recycled material. It's coming from post-consumer, post-industrial waste streams. For example, end-of-life plastic from the car industry. So this could well come from a car dashboard, car bumper, and we get the opportunity to turn it into a plant pot.
How easy is it to recycle black plastic pots?
Tricky question. We can recycle all of our customers' black plastic pots very, very easily. But for the wider general public, it's very hard for these to be recycled in a curbside collection box, purely because they contain carbon black pigment.
Just to remind you, most recycling plants use an infrared light to sort the different types of plastics, but black materials don't reflect the light back, so they don't get sorted. That's often the reason black plastics don't get picked up at curbside recycling. What can be done to improve this, to make it more recyclable?
We have to change the blend of polymer used. So we have to go to a carbon pigment-free base material, and we have to use a carbon pigment-free colorant. And luckily, the industry is starting to make change now to start to replace its black pots.
Actually, just a few days before this interview, 10 of the big horticultural growers in the UK met with 5 plastic manufacturers to discuss different ways to replace the current black pots. The growers chose a neutral shade of taupe, and the manufacturers have all been invited to supply this colour.
This is fresh off the production line this morning.
Wow.
Effectively, it's 95, 98% recycled material.
Yeah.
The key thing here is the fact that it's carbon pigment free, and so is the colour. So this product is detectable on sorting machines, and it will identify what polymer it is. And in this case, this is polypropylene. That then will stand a chance of being recycled.
One of the reasons I understand that black has also been used in the industry is so that the light doesn't go onto the plant roots. What's the success rate, do we know, of this
So
colour?
it's early days, so a lot of this product is now starting to go out to the commercial nurseries so that they basically have peace of mind that the product is fit for purpose. We think it's as close as we can probably get to black.
Well, this is exciting and maybe a step forward to making plastic pots more recyclable. We'll keep you updated on how the trials go, and this little pile is for Monty. Of course, the tote pot isn't the only option. Other producers are also finding ways of making pots more easily recycled using different colours and materials. But until then, we still have a big issue of what to do with all of the plastic pots piled up in our sheds and greenhouses. But there could be a solution from the garden centres. I'm meeting with Martin Simmons from the Horticultural Trades Association, who represent lots of businesses in the industry. What are your members feeling about, plastic use in horticulture?
The industry is very much aware that it is quite closely connected to nature and the environment, and the industry wants to be doing right for the environment. We introduced a recycling scheme earlier this year. That really uses a system whereby plant pots can be collected from garden centres all over the country and then go off for recycling. It's not that system isn't a curbside recycling scheme, but at least it gets rid of the problem and stops pots going into landfill.
How successful has that recycling scheme been?
It's been incredibly successful so far, with, I think, huge potential to grow much further as more and more people become aware of it.
It launched just a few months ago, but so far, only about 30 garden centres have signed up, citing a lack of storage space, some having to pay to have it taken away, or customers using the pot collection as a place to dump other waste. But they are now recycling up to 40 tonnes of plastic a month. So it's not perfect, but it definitely seems to be helping. Of course, the best situation would be for them to be recycled on your doorstep. But there seems to be a lot of barriers that currently prevent that at the moment. We asked the man in charge in government, Michael Gove, what steps he'll be taking.
We do need to do more in every sector. One of the things we're looking at is the whole producer responsibility scheme and asking ourselves, is there more that we should ban and is there more that we should tax as well, so that we make sure that the environmental costs of using particular types of plastic are borne by the people who produce this material in the first place. And not only is that a way of generating more cash, actually, which we can then put into recycling, it also means it's a spur to innovation so that companies that are producing alternatives can find that they're more competitive.
We also asked how he's planning to make curbside recycling easier.
There's a wide array of different the rules and regulations on recycling, depending on where you are in the country. And one of the things that we hope to do with our resources and waste strategy that we're publishing this autumn is to try to bring a degree of coherence so that across the country, wherever you are, you will know how to recycle, and we're going to make it, I hope, easier and clearer for everyone to do the right thing.
In the meantime, there's a simple step we can all take, but it does take a bit more effort. Back to Richard Kirkman at the refuse facility.
If you can't reuse your plastic plant pot, then you can bring it to one of these household waste recycling centres. You should have one locally. Some people know them as the tip or the dump. But these days, we recycle everything that comes here. We'll put them in the hard plastics. They'll go off to be cleaned and washed and made back into new things.
But it isn't nationwide. You'll have to check whether your local tip or dump will actually recycle plastic plant pots, not just take them to be disposed of. After talking with so many people, I'd love to offer you some advice that would apply to everyone, but I found it frustratingly hard to come up with anything concrete. So I'll tell you what I've taken away from this. The horticultural industry have acknowledged they have a responsibility, and it looks like they're beginning to make changes. But as a gardener, I've acknowledged I have a responsibility too, and I'm going to work harder to ensure plastics in my garden don't just have one use.
It's clear that big changes are needed, and this issue isn't going to go away. But rest assured, we will be revisiting this story next year and talking again to DEFRA to see if the new strategies mentioned have been put in place, and if they have, are they beginning to make a difference? The good news is that at least everybody is acknowledging that there is a problem and we have to do something about it. And the development of this new pot made from recycled material, which I didn't know about, and I think that is a really positive move, if it works, is going to make a difference. But the critical thing, of course, is does it work as a pot? Does it grow good plants? And that's what we need to know. So I'm going to do an informal test. This is not a proper experiment. That's happening in the industry, and lots of people are doing that. But what I thought as a gardener is I would grow the same plants in both pots. And I've got 3 different types of plants. I've got erodium, which have got fibrous roots. I've got teasels, that have got a tap root, and I've got hetunia, which have a really fleshy root. Now, I'm using my standard mixed compost, and there's enough here for all the pots. Take 1 scoop and put it in the bottom, and take the pot and sit that on top and fill around it. Don't worry the fact that it's on top of the pot, because I will show you what we'll do. Lift it like that, leaves a space, take it out, pop that in. There it goes, that's 1. The reason why this method is so good when you're potting on is because the tiny little feeding roots that you can hardly see can remain undisturbed. Right, that's the first plant. Now, the teasel are a classic taproot plant. It's a completely different type of root. So we need to label that. That's a teasel. And finally, we have a hetunia. It's a good example of a plant with a nice fleshy root. You will see they are very different from the other 2. Put that in there. And last, three very different plants with very different demands of the soil and the container that they're in. And I'm going to do 3 of each, just to make sure I've got all bases covered. And I shall store them all side by side outside the greenhouse. They will all be watered at exactly the same time. They'll be exposed to the same amount of light. And then we'll come back next March and see how they are and follow their progress right through till next summer. I have to stress, this is not a scientific test. It's just a matter of interest on my behalf to see how they fare. Now, the purpose of growing any plant, doesn't matter what you grow it in, is to make a lovely garden. And we went to North London to visit a tiny garden, which is also very beautiful.
I live and work in London. After a busy day at work, I can't wait to come in the garden. It very much feels like my haven, my sanctuary. I love it. I moved into the flat back in 2010. When I came in, the first thing I saw was an empty space, boring space, I must say. So I built a raised bed, first in wood, now it's in steel. Then came the big architectural features. So the first thing was the tree ferns, the Fatsia japonica on the one corner and the Japanese maple. So that was basically the frame of the garden. And over time, it just grew organically. The garden is quite small. It's 5.5 meters by 6 in depth, barely 6. Really, what I try to do is make it as big as I could with, you know, what I had to work with. So almost you create the illusion that the garden keeps on going, but in reality, it just ends 6 meters away. So what I've done here really is layer these plants in a way that actually gives the viewer the impression that there's a lot more space than there really is. There's the clematis here, and behind there's the small-leaved ivy. So when you're viewing from inside, you think that they're much farther away than they really are. In addition, what I've tried to do is make the end of the garden a bit darker as well. And that darkness in the back actually doesn't reveal what's behind, so that's how that sense of depth is created when viewed from inside the flat. In addition to the more temperate plants, I have a few tropicals, which I really like. I guess the stars are the colocaceas, with their big heart-shaped leaves, and reminds me of my Colombian roots. So I think the colocaceas do bring a very tropical feel to the garden because they actually thrive in very hot, sunny, damp conditions. This one is black magic, and it's quite velvety and soft. It doesn't survive an English winter, so I have to bring it inside every November, stays there probably until May, and then I bring it outside. I have it inside a pot, which I've actually carved out the bottom. So literally what I do is I cut down the roots, just remove it from the soil, put it on a saucer full of pebbles. Then I prune back all the leaves, but leave the stem itself, because it's out of the stem that the new growth will come back the next spring. Obviously, the garden is very much part of the flat, so I wanted to create a sense of continuity between the in and the outdoors. So in this space here, I've planted sempervivums, or house leeks. It's a space that basically was full of gravel and utilized, and managed to actually make a little garden out of it. They've done really well, they've thrived. I literally cover the entire gravel space, and in the spring and early summer, they all flower. It does create that sense of continuity when you're inside. You really don't know where the limit, where the border is. What I've tried to do is obviously use every inch. I bought this pot of baby tears, or mind your own business, as it's known as well. And then I cut it in pieces, and then I plugged it into the gap between the paved area. It has literally spread from the back all the way here, and what's nice about it, it brings this wetland, watery feel, which is great. It is a great refuge for worms, so it goes quite thick in the summer. I would warn people to use it in places where it doesn't invade, so avoid it in lawns. However, in patios like this one is great because it holds all the different pots together. So it's a nice coverage for the plants, for the wildlife. The garden not only brings me joy and brings nature to home, but also it feels very, very Colombian, very tropical. And that's what I try to achieve, and I think I've done it.
Funnily enough, the very first garden that Sarah and I ever made was just down the road from there. But the key thing I remember about it was that although it was small, the amount of pleasure that we got from it was every bit as big as anything that we've done since. And if you remember, I planted this stone trough with miniature thyme, and we did that in May. Slowly, these little delicate thyme plants have spread out and they're already beginning to lick over the edge. And they, of course, have loved this summer and the heat. The fragrance is fantastic. And in this trough, a curious thing has happened. We've got all these little lavender seedlings. It shows you what lavender likes, because you've got the lavender hedge, it seeds itself, and then the seeds fall into this almost pure grit, and they love it. So what I'm going to do is dig them up, pot them up, grow them on, and I can have another lavender hedge. And the idea is just to tease it out without damaging the planting that it's growing through, which might be easier said than done, but I want to get as much root as possible. There we are. Nice long root. And like all bare root plants, this is when it's at its most vulnerable because they dry out very quickly. So have a plastic bag with you and just pop it in, and then that will keep it moist for the next 20 minutes or so before I go in and pot up a good collection of them. Now, you may not have lavender seedlings to dig up, but here are some other jobs you can do this weekend. Now is the time to help tomato plants put all their energy into ripening existing fruit rather than creating new ones. Remove all the top of the cordon down to the top truss that already has green fruit. And this will give them a real chance of ripening. If you have any hardy cuttings that were taken a year or so ago and have developed roots, it's a good idea to get them out of a container and into the soil. They can then spend the winter developing a better root system and also a relationship with the microorganisms in your particular garden. And this will mean they develop much better when you finally plant them out. Do not be seduced by the amount of growth that your pumpkins and squashes are showing. Most of it is not helping the development of the fruits. So cut back all those tendrils that just have flowers or very small fruits, leaving the plant to put its energy into the fruits that are already half-formed. The old shrub roses that I absolutely love tend to have a single flowering, somewhere from early June to the middle of July. But the modern shrub roses, and I've got three behind me, there's Crown Princess Margarita, the Pilgrim, and Charles Darwin, all will reflower. And this is one of their great virtues. They're fantastic from the end of May into July. Then this year, they just stopped dead. We didn't have a single rose throughout the whole of August. But now they are coming back, and they will go on flowering into November even. So that is a real autumnal bonus that we get here in the garden. But no more flowering today because that's it. However, I'll see you back here at Longmeadow next time. Till then, bye-bye.